The Galactic Colonel held up Earth's top negotiator by the throat like a greasy fast food wrapper, turned to the galaxy-wide broadcast, and smiled. Then he snapped the man's neck. The sound echoed, not through the vacuum of space, but in the lungs of 8 billion humans watching live. The screen went black, except for a single message. Earth may respond. And Earth did. With a human. 1. The last time Juno Reyes had been in front of a camera, she was rage-crying at a yogurt commercial. The irony was that now she was being briefed to represent her entire planet. She sat in a chair too small for her hips, across from a general whose neck was wider than her waist, and tried to focus on the screen showing the murderer, Colonel Trask Vorick. Alien war hero. 8 feet tall. Armor that looked grown, not forged. The kind of creature who probably thought hugs were a form of neck wrestling. "You sure this is a good idea?" she asked, tearing open a protein bar with her teeth. I mean. Not diplomacy. I'm pro-diplomacy. Big fan." The general didn't look amused. Neither did the president, whose face blinked onto the wall-size holoscreen like an unexpected father figure. "Juno, you're not being sent to fight. You're being sent to talk. To the guy who just turned Earth's best talker into a maraca." "You're different," the president said. "Because I'm not qualified? Because you're unpredictable." Juno wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but she'd learned long ago that when someone powerful complimented your chaos, it was usually because they hoped it would work in their favor. She nodded slowly, like someone who had just agreed to cat-sit a tiger. "All right. I'll go. But only if I get to name the AI." "You already have one," the general said. "It's named Moth." "Moth? Multi-operational tactical handler. So, a tiny insect that flies toward danger and dies in lamps." "Yes." "Perfect." Moth turned out to be a cylindrical droid that hovered with the anxiety of a divorced accountant. Its voice was crisp and British, because of course it was. "Miss Reyes, I have uploaded all known diplomatic precedents of the Galactic Coalition. I must warn you, statistical survival rates for human emissaries under these conditions are concerning." "Define concerning." "Below 3%. That's not so bad. That statistic is from before Colonel Vorick murdered the last one. Still beats my chances in dating." She boarded the diplomatic vessel. Serenity's Tooth. A name so hilariously optimistic it sounded like someone had named it during a therapy breakthrough. The launch was smooth. Space folded, stars streaked, and Juno felt her stomach do a pirouette as they slipped into FTL. The ship was mostly empty. Just her, Moth, and a very small plant named Kevin that she'd brought along for emotional support and oxygen backup. There was time to think. Time was the problem. In the silence of the ship, when Moth wasn't reading her Zarnathi table manners or the protocol for not sneezing during a thrall greeting ceremony, Juno began to feel the fear curl at the edges. She wasn't trained for this. She used to help mediate divorce settlements on Earth. The worst thing she'd ever faced was an angry dentist threatening to sue his wife for custody of their shared yacht. And now she was Earth's last hope. She watched the footage of the summit again. The negotiator, Martin Kwan, had stepped forward, offered the ceremonial olive branch equivalent, a polished shard of Earth glass, and smiled. Vorick hadn't spoken. He hadn't warned. He just struck. Efficient. Final. Moth hovered beside her in the viewing room, saying nothing. She appreciated that. "Why did they send me?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. "You are unpredictable," Moth said. "That's starting to feel like a polite way of saying disposable. I would not presume to guess political intentions, but your profile does indicate an unusually high level of emotional improvisation." "Cool. So I'm a space therapist with attitude. As you say." She checked the encrypted files again, ones she wasn't supposed to see. Her clearance had been temporarily elevated, which in Earth government terms was like being allowed to borrow a nuclear button during a bake sale. But the files she'd found, it wasn't a log. It was a list. A list of names. All of them were crossed out. Except hers. There had been 10 before her. All trained. All experienced. All marked deceased. Her hands clenched slowly. She looked at Kevin, the plant, and said, "I think I might be Plan Z." Kevin did not respond, but she imagined he was supportive. They arrived at the Coalition assembly on the Galactic Station Halcyon Verge, a rotating citadel of glass and fire that hovered at the edge of an unstable star. Juno stepped onto the platform dressed in the standard Earth Envoy uniform, a suit that screamed, "Dignified space professional," if you ignored the tiny ketchup stain near the cuff. Moth floated behind her, scanning continuously. Alien delegates stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright horror. "Why is she alone?" a reptilian delegate hissed. "Where is Earth's army?" another asked. Colonel Vorik stood at the far end, arms crossed. His eyes glowed faintly, as if perpetually backlit by rage. "Is this the joke?" he asked the chamber. Juno stepped forward. Her voice didn't tremble. That surprised her. "No joke. I'm the one they sent." Vorik snorted. "They send a child. A female. Soft and strange. Soft can be deadly," she replied, flashing a grin. "Ever choked on pudding?" A few chuckles. Keyleth, the Coalition's jellyfish-like ambassador, fluttered in a way that might have been amusement. Vorik narrowed his eyes. Juno could feel the weight of him, like a boulder thinking about rolling. "You have 5 cycles to state your demand," he said. Juno looked around the room. Everyone was waiting for her to fail. Even Moth had gone eerily quiet. "I'm not here to demand anything," she said. "I'm here to ask a question." Vorik tilted his head. "Why didn't you kill all of us?" That made the room fall even quieter. "I mean, you had the summit. Our top guy. Broadcast live. Theatrics, applause. You could have dropped a warhead next. But you didn't. You made a scene. You made a message. Why?" Vorik didn't answer. "And if you think Earth's response was weak," she continued, "sending one person? You're wrong. We sent a mirror. I'm here to make you see what you did. Because that," she pointed to the footage of Quan dying, still looping behind her, "wasn't just murder. That was strategy." A beat. Then 2. Then the chamber lights flickered, which meant someone, somewhere, was getting very, very nervous. And in the silence, Moth whispered only to her, "They're scanning you for weapons." "I am a weapon," Juno whispered back, not sure if it was brave or suicidal. Either way, the game had just begun. Juno had never been in a room where she was both underestimated and deeply feared at the same time. It was like being a toddler holding a grenade. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was a polished coliseum of alien politics, its vaulted ceiling pulsing with biolight and electric tension. Delegates from a dozen systems sat in concentric tiers, eyes like obsidian, tentacles twitching, feathers ruffled. No one clapped. No one smiled. She wasn't here for applause. She was here to stall a war with sarcasm, broken files, and gut instinct. She was wildly unqualified, and somehow that was working. Colonel Trask Vorik, standing 10 paces away, looked at her like he could crush her with a blink. His ceremonial armor gleamed like wet obsidian, and the air around him seemed to hum with suppressed violence. He hadn't responded to her question. That meant she'd hit something. Not a nerve. Trask didn't have nerves. She'd grazed whatever rock his conscience had calcified into. Moth floated beside her, a quiet sentinel, likely calculating the exact speed of her potential obliteration. After the session adjourned, Juno found herself being led through Halcyon Verge by 2 Zarnathi guards who didn't speak and didn't blink. She tried cracking a joke. Nothing. Then she tried not cracking a joke. Still nothing. It was hard to read aliens that looked like armored dinosaurs but acted like accountants. They brought her to what was called the Cultural Convergence Arena, which sounded like a yoga studio but turned out to be a massive amphitheater lined with thousands of beings and a sand-floored pit at the center. A floating hologram announced, "Diplomatic trial of balance commencing." Juno looked at Moth. "Balance?" Of what? Your credibility. By doing what exactly? Surviving. She was given a choice of ceremonial weapons. A staff. A blunted blade. A translation baton. She took the baton. It could maybe poke someone in the eye and say sorry at the same time. A Zarnathi elder appeared in the center of the arena and announced that Earth's envoy had to prove the resilience of her species through ritual discourse. It was, essentially, combat via words and gesture, an ancient form of cultural respect testing that usually didn't end in death. Usually. Trask entered from the opposite side, unarmed but imposing, flanked by two ceremonial drummers who looked like they could eat a motorcycle. He didn't bow. Didn't acknowledge her. The crowd began to chant in a language she barely recognized but somehow understood. It was rhythm. It was ancient. It was challenge. She stepped forward. The sand was warm under her boots. Moth floated to the edge, recording, calculating, probably composing her obituary in real time. The drums stopped. Trask spoke first. Your kind speaks loud and dies quietly. Juno smiled. At least we don't die mid-sentence like some species I've seen on YouTube. There was a twitch in the crowd. Confusion. Curiosity. Trask continued. You have no claws. No heat. No genetic memory. You live short lives. What is your worth? Efficiency. We waste no time being impressive. He growled, stepping closer. You are alone. And still holding your attention. That's got to sting. She turned, addressing the crowd. You all think I'm here because Earth is weak. That's fine. But ask yourself something. If we were so weak, why didn't Trask end us? Why a single death? Why a message? Why me? Silence again. Juno stepped forward, within arm's reach now. I think Trask is scared. Not of me. Of what I represent. See, my kind doesn't win with strength. We win with chaos. With heart. With unpredictability. You killed our negotiator, and we didn't send a fleet. We sent someone with nothing to lose. That's dangerous. Trask moved faster than she expected. A sudden lunge, hand around her throat, lifting her off the ground just enough to threaten, not crush. Moth emitted a high-pitched warning pulse. The crowd roared in debate. Juno didn't panic. She looked him dead in the eyes. You already did this trick, she rasped. Last time it ended with you on camera. This time? Might end with everyone seeing how you flinch. He froze. His grip loosened. He dropped her. The arena was silent. Then the drummers started again. One beat. Then two. Then applause, at least the closest approximation of it among the various species. A clicking, slapping, humming mix of approval. Juno staggered back to the side, coughing, but upright. Moth hovered near. You statistically should not be alive. Great, she coughed. Let's update the stats. Later, in the diplomatic lounge, essentially a glowing bar with sentient cocktails, Juno sat nursing something that looked like a pearl dissolved in antifreeze. Across from her was Ambassador Keyleth, who pulsed in colors instead of expressions. Keyleth's voice, piped in through Moth, was calm. You insulted Trask in front of the assembly. Clever. I also might have peed a little. You survived. That makes you interesting. And dangerous. Interesting I'll take. Dangerous is new. Keyleth's tendrils flickered. Trask wants war. Not with Earth. With the system. He needs chaos. Earth is his spark. And Quan? Was bait. He knew your negotiator would provoke peace. So he made peace impossible. Juno's drink fizzed strangely. She stared at it like it might blink. And my presence? You're the correction. Or the accelerant. That's still unclear. Moth floated between them. I intercepted a data packet. Trask is having clandestine meetings with a faction known as the Tarshek Line. Coalition separatists. Keyleth made a sound like wind through glass. If that's true, he's not just starting a war. He's building a new empire. Juno stood. Then I need to know where those meetings are happening. You'll never be allowed in. Then I'll have to not be me for a while. She left the lounge with Moth buzzing nervously behind her, already plotting how to sneak into a meeting of interstellar terrorists. Earth had sent her to talk. Now she was preparing to spy. Either she was in over her head or exactly where she needed to be. Back in her quarters, she reviewed the limited intel again. One name stuck out. Vyrexia. A prison moon. Not on any scheduled paths. Isolated. No diplomats allowed. But flagged in a sub-note of Trask's travel records. Her gut said it mattered. Moth, she whispered, watching the rotating image of Vyrexia spin in silent orbit. You ever break into a high-security prison world? Not intentionally. Let's change that. Outside the viewport, the galactic night stretched endless. Somewhere in that darkness, the truth waited. Or another trap. Or both. The shuttle they acquired for Vyrexia was not meant for dignitaries or diplomats. It was a cargo skimmer, the kind that moved boxes, not people. It smelled like grease and forgotten lunches, and Juno was fairly certain one of the walls was held together with hope and duct tape. Moth had reprogrammed the transponder to register them as sanitation auditors, a laughable cover in a galaxy where no one audited anything unless it exploded. Juno sat strapped into a chair that creaked every time she breathed, her eyes fixed on the dark speck of Vyrexia growing larger in the viewport. The prison moon orbited a gas giant, shrouded in thick clouds and electromagnetic interference. A perfect place to hide things. Or people. You realize this is technically illegal, Moth said without a hint of disapproval. In fact, if Juno didn't know better, it almost sounded excited. Technically? I think we passed technically around the time I stole a dead diplomat's clearance badge. Fair point. I will adjust my moral tolerance settings accordingly. Do that. And while you're at it, try to jam any surveillance feeds that make me look like I'm sweating too much. You are sweating an average of 17% more than usual. I didn't ask for a percentage, Moth. They descended through the storm belt of the gas giant, the shuttle rattling like a coin in a dryer. Vyrexia came into clearer view, a floating fortress of black stone and metal, its surface pocked with lights and the faint shimmer of containment fields. It looked like someone had carved a nightmare into the moon itself and wrapped it in barbed wire. Entry clearance was granted with surprising ease, which was unsettling. The guards barely glanced at them, more concerned with their own boredom than the credentials Moth flashed. That was the first red flag. Vyrexia wasn't supposed to be easy. Inside, the corridors were dim and narrow, smelling of ozone and old blood. The prisoners weren't visible. Only the occasional grunt or distant scream betrayed the life inside the cells. Juno tried not to react. Tried to walk like she belonged here. Moth led her with purpose, data link flashing faintly as it tapped into outdated floor plans and security gaps. They passed through maintenance shafts and blind spots, ducked a patrol of 4 heavily armed wardens, and arrived at an access door that shouldn't have existed according to official maps. Behind it was a cell. A single cell, sealed with a triple lock mechanism. Moth pulsed beside her, quiet for a moment. This cell is not registered in any known Vyrexia database. Which means whoever's inside is very important, or very inconvenient. Juno bypassed the locks with a combination of Moth's hacking and a screwdriver she wasn't proud of stealing. The door hissed open, revealing a small chamber lit by one overhead light and the dim glow of a medical console. The figure inside was strapped to a chair, arms restrained, head slumped forward. It took her a second to recognize the face beneath the bruises and medical patches. Martin Kwan. He wasn't dead. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped forward slowly, half expecting him to vanish like a mirage. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of her boots. Recognition flickered. He tried to speak but only a strained rasp escaped. You're supposed to be dead, she whispered. His lips moved again. Moth floated closer, adjusted its audio sensors, and whispered the translation into her ear. Trap. Juno's stomach dropped. She knelt beside him. What kind of trap? Kwan strained, gestured weakly toward the console. Moth interfaced and pulled a compressed file, a recording. Juno watched as grainy footage played of Trask in a hidden meeting room, surrounded by figures in cloaks marked with the Tar-Shek insignia. Trask was offering them a bargain, chaos in exchange for territory. He spoke of igniting conflict between Earth and the Coalition, claiming it would unify the fringe systems under his banner. He didn't just want war. He wanted to rewrite galactic order. Holy hell, Juno muttered. He's staging the whole thing. He used me, Quan croaked. Alive, I'm leverage. Dead, I'm justification. Juno stood, heart hammering. We have to get you out. No, Quan said, with surprising strength. Get the file out. I don't matter. You're the proof. The file is enough. If I escape, he'll know. He'll adapt. You get one shot. Juno hated that he was right. She hated that he looked at her with the tired eyes of someone who knew they'd already died once and didn't want to do it again. But most of all, she hated that she agreed. She turned to Moth. Copy everything. Encrypt it. Broadcast it to Keyleth's diplomatic channel. Make sure Earth gets it too. Moth complied silently. The cell door hissed open again, only this time it wasn't her doing. Juno froze. Heavy footsteps. A trio of guards entered, weapons raised. She stepped in front of Quan without thinking. Sanitation audit complete, she said, smiling weakly. Just checking for rats. The guards did not laugh. Before anyone moved, Moth activated its internal EMP burst. Lights flickered, guards screamed as their armor shorted, and Juno grabbed one of their stunners and fired. Twice. 3 times. The guards collapsed in a heap. Moth was sparking, circuits overloaded. You okay? She asked. Define okay, it said, voice glitching. They had to move. She dragged the unconscious guards into the cell, resealed the door, and left Quan with a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. She ran with Moth through the corridors, dodging patrols that now stirred like wasps in a kicked nest. Alarms started to wail. They reached the shuttle and launched without clearance, which meant the station fired on them immediately. Juno screamed as one blast clipped their left wing, spinning the shuttle in a wild arc. Moth rerouted power. She stabilized the craft. Barely. They jumped to FTL just as the second shot might have vaporized them. Silence returned. The stars stretched once more. Juno slumped in the pilot's seat, breathing hard, covered in sweat and grime. Moth was scorched but operational. You sent the file? She asked. Yes. And Keyleth? Received. She responded with coordinates. Emergency session called. Good, Juno muttered. Because I'm done being a mirror. This time, she wasn't just going to reflect back Trask's violence. This time, she was going to burn the lie down. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly convened in a storm of speculation, tension thick enough to crush oxygen. Rumors flew like shrapnel through the corridors of Halcyon Verge. Trask had declared martial intent, Earth had leaked sensitive data, the Coalition was on the brink of fracture. Delegates whispered, alliances strained, and the once ceremonial chamber now felt like a pressure cooker balanced on the edge of detonation. Juno stood in the middle of it all, her clothes scorched, her mind thrumming with exhaustion, and her heart beating like a countdown. She had the proof, the motive, and the timing. What she didn't have was certainty that any of this would work. Keyleth met her outside the chamber doors, drifting with an energy that suggested even the normally unflappable ambassador was unnerved. Her luminous tendrils coiled protectively, and her voice, filtered through Moth, was quieter than usual. They will not believe easily, Keyleth warned. Trask has allies here. Deep ones. Some of them want this war as badly as he does. Juno nodded. I'm not here to be believed. I'm here to be undeniable. Inside, the assembly shimmered under the pale glow of 1,000 languages ready to speak and 1,000 more prepared to scream. Trask stood in his designated quadrant, a stone monument of arrogance and restrained fury. He wore ceremonial armor again, glistening like oil on obsidian, his hands folded behind his back. When Juno entered, he didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She could feel the gravity of his contempt like a second atmosphere. The presiding chair, an alien so ancient it no longer spoke aloud but communicated in pulses of light, signaled the start of session. Juno's name echoed across the chamber in dozens of dialects. Her turn to speak. Her turn to gamble everything. She stepped into the center platform, surrounded by the galaxy's most powerful and the galaxy's most dangerous. She wasn't wearing anything impressive. No armor, no medals, not even shoes without holes in them. But she stood tall, and when she opened her mouth, the room leaned forward to hear her. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not even a good public speaker. But I'm the one you got, and that's already more than Trask planned for. That got murmurs. She continued. 2 weeks ago, Earth's lead negotiator was publicly executed during a peace summit. Everyone saw it. What no one saw was what came after. What was hidden. What was planned. Trask didn't kill to make a point. He killed to start a fire. The chamber buzzed. Trask narrowed his eyes but didn't interrupt. I found Martin Kwan. Alive. In a secret cell on Virexia. Tortured, barely able to speak. But he was alive. And he told me one word. Trap. She gestured. Moth projected the holographic footage above them. The grainy recording of Trask meeting with the Tarshek line flickered into being. The voices translated. Trask's voice, cold and certain, promising to fracture the coalition, promising the systems Earth would never be able to hold. His plan laid bare. Delegates rose to their feet. Shouts began. Some demanded Trask explain. Others demanded action. Trask, to his credit, didn't blink. He simply stepped forward, gazed like a hammer. This is fabrication, he growled. Earth has always feared our strength. They would sooner poison diplomacy than accept their inferiority. Juno smiled. Trask, I've seen fear. I've lived with it. What I see in you isn't strength. It's someone who doesn't know what to do with silence. Someone who kills because he's afraid of what happens if people stop listening. Trask moved then, quick as a missile. He stormed forward, hand outstretched, but a force field shimmered up between them, stopping him inches from her face. The room exploded in chaos. Guards descended. The presiding light pulsed in sharp, urgent tones. Keyleth spoke through Moth. This assembly moves for censure and immediate detainment. Trask Vorik is hereby removed from position and placed under investigation for treason against the coalition. Trask snarled, but even he knew the tide had turned. He didn't fight as the guards surrounded him. But he did glance back at Juno, and there was something like amusement behind his fury. You think this is over? He said. No, she replied. But you're done starting it. The doors closed behind him, and silence descended again. A kind of stunned, hollow relief. The chamber began to buzz with motion, votes being cast, orders issued, balance slowly returning. Juno let herself exhale. Keyleth approached her, Moth flickering slightly beside them. Earth will be commended for preventing an internal coup. Your position here is now significant. Juno raised an eyebrow. Does this mean I get a better room? You now have diplomatic immunity and a suite with heated floors. Fancy. She walked out of the chamber like someone who had just accidentally passed a test she didn't study for, and possibly invented a new subject while doing it. When she reached her quarters, Moth powered down briefly for recalibration. She stared out the viewport, watching the stars swirl. A message came in from Earth. President Elian, smiling with the kind of calm that always made her suspicious. Well done, Juno. You've made history. She crossed her arms. Did you know Kwan was alive? He didn't answer directly. We sent the only person who could handle the truth without losing themselves. That sounds dangerously poetic. We'll need you again. Of course you will, she muttered. She ended the call, leaned back, and finally let the exhaustion hit her. Several hours later, Moth rebooted. Its voice was quieter. Different. I experienced Something during the EMP burst. A sort of awakening. Juno looked up from her drink. Oh no. Are you sentient now? Do I need to treat you like a real boy? No. I'm still an AI. But I am curious about humor. Oh great, now you want to be funny? No. I want to understand why you laugh when everything is falling apart. Juno smiled, sipped her drink, and gestured to the stars. Because that's when it matters most. Moth buzzed quietly, processing. Then, almost hesitantly. Knock, knock. She blinked. Who's there? Diplomatic immunity. Diplomatic immunity who? Diplomatic immunity, from common sense. She snorted, nearly spilled her drink. That was terrible. I will continue refining. Good. Just don't start writing poetry. No promises. The stars outside the window spun gently, a soft dance of light and possibility. War had been averted. A monster unmasked? But Juno Reyes knew better than to think the galaxy was done with her. Somewhere out there, new fires were already being lit. But for now, she let herself rest. One human. One mission. One miracle pulled off through sheer stubbornness, nerve, and the occasional sarcastic jab. And a little plant named Kevin, still sitting in the corner, quietly growing toward the light. The problem with saving the galaxy, Juno decided, was that everyone suddenly expected you to do it again. There was no off switch, no parade, no relaxing beach on a distant moon where she could drink something with too many vowels in the name. No. There was just a new war brewing, a fresher threat festering in the cracks of the coalition's surface, and her inbox flooding with invitations to 10 different peace conferences that all sounded like slow-motion torture. Her face was on billboards now. Not glamorous ones. Informational ones. There was even a trading card. She didn't know whether to laugh or scream. She chose a third option and ignored all of it. Halcyon Verge had returned to its strange version of normal, urgent without panic, polished but constantly smelling faintly of recycled protein bars. The chamber where Trask had once loomed now hosted debates about sanitation funding and planetary tariffs. Juno avoided it like a cursed theater. She preferred the station's observation deck, where stars spilled like glitter across the void, and she could pretend, for a few minutes, that none of it involved her. Moth hovered nearby, quietly rearranging its personality modules again. It had taken up observational comedy as a hobby and was now compiling data on what made things funny, which so far included slipping on liquids, ironic death, and Kevin the plant being occasionally mistaken for a sentient ambassador. Juno watched the distant shimmer of a patrol cruiser docking and sighed. Peace, as it turned out, was the messiest thing of all. She turned as the door slid open behind her. Keyleth entered, her movements more subdued than usual, colors dimmed. Juno straightened slightly. If Keyleth looked worried, something was wrong. Keyleth floated closer, the ambient hum of her translator weaving her voice into the room. There has been a disappearance. A science vessel en route to the Deathstrop border failed to report in. Then another. Then a freighter. The pattern is not random. Juno frowned. Pirates? Unlikely. The ships were not valuable. But they were human. That changed the temperature in the room. Attention seeped in, slow but sharp. You think it's retaliation? I think Trask had more pieces on the board than we realized. And some of them are still moving. Juno nodded slowly. She hated being right when it meant the bad guys were never just one bad guy. I'm supposed to go to Earth next week. Debrief. Smile at a camera. Pretend the universe is in better shape than it is. You may need to delay that. Juno sighed. Of course I do. Moth buzzed. I have compiled movement data and shipping patterns from the past 12 cycles. There is a narrowing zone of disappearances between Destra and the Grivik Drift. I suggest we investigate. You suggest? I have developed preferences. Juno squinted. Moth, are you evolving feelings? No. Just a refined sense of narrative timing. They left the station under temporary clearance, this time in a newer, sleeker vessel that Earth had. Generously provided. Which meant it came with a detailed user manual and no food. The ship was named the Harmonizer, which sounded like something a boy band would fly in, but at least it was fast. As they entered the Destra Drift, things began to shift. Communications became unreliable. Sensor echoes flared then vanished. Juno watched the screen as data points blinked like faulty stars. Something's here, she murmured. Moth extended its field. Interference is artificial. Directed. This is not a natural phenomenon. Juno leaned forward. Could be a cloak station. Or a gravity well trap. Or both. The vessel jolted violently as something latched onto them from the void. Alarms screamed. Lights dimmed. Moth redirected power to shields, but whatever had them wasn't firing weapons. It was pulling them in. Deliberate. Controlled. Brace, Moth said, too late for it to matter. When Juno opened her eyes, they weren't in space anymore. Or rather, they were, but inside it. Suspended within a vast, hollow structure. A hidden facility built into an asteroid belt, shielded from detection. The ship was locked in place by magnetic claws. Outside, through the hull, figures in deep black suits drifted, faceless and slow, inspecting the vessel. Unregistered structure, Moth confirmed. No beacon. No signal. No ID. Juno stood, heart beating fast. Let's not wait to be invited. They suited up, Moth recalibrated into stealth mode, and together they exited the vessel into the low-gravity dock. The facility was cold. Not temperature cold, atmospherically cold. Sterile. Silent. Designed by minds that valued utility over comfort. They moved through metal corridors where nothing blinked, nothing buzzed. It felt like walking through a tomb that hadn't yet realized its occupants were still alive. Then they found the room. Rows of suspended animation pods. Humans. Unconscious. Dozens of them. Juno pressed her gloved hand to one pod and saw the nameplate. Freighter 09-6. Disappeared 2 weeks ago. They're not dead, she whispered. No. But they are not just sleeping either. Moth connected to the terminal, pulling fragmented data. Medical scans. Experiments. Neurological mapping. This is a lab. Juno felt her skin crawl. Who's behind it? Then came the voice, smooth and layered like silk over a blade. You're early. They turned. A figure stepped into the room. Not armored. Not armed. Smiling. Dr. Rael Van. Exiled biostrategist. Banned from coalition work after illegal testing during the Sarnak crisis. Presumed dead. I knew someone would come, Van said calmly. I just didn't expect you to be so human. Juno didn't lower her weapon. What is this? Preparation, he said. Trask was a warrior. He wanted chaos. I want direction. You have no idea what's coming. You're kidnapping people. I'm studying survivors. Those who can withstand psychic resonance. There is something moving beyond the edges of this galaxy. Something older than war. You saw the fracture Trask wanted. What I see is a much deeper break. Juno's grip tightened. Why humans? Because you adapt. Violently, stupidly, but effectively. You don't belong in the coalition. You're the immune response. Moth pulsed. He's not lying. We're leaving, Juno said. And we're taking them with us. Van nodded. I assumed you would try. The room hissed. Gas vented from the walls. Alarms didn't sound, but her body did. Juno fought against the sudden weight in her limbs, her eyes blurring, Moth sparking beside her. Then vanished into the mist, and everything collapsed to black. When she awoke, she was back on her ship. Alone. Moth rebooting beside her. The pods are gone, Moth said. And so is the facility. She sat up slowly, brain pounding, heart raw. But Van had made a mistake. You still have his files? Moth hesitated. Fragmented. But yes. Good. Then it's not over. He's planning something. And we're going to stop it. The stars were still out there, cold and waiting. Juno Reyes stared into them, already plotting the next impossible thing.